Back in, folks, on the number one source, hottest show on the streets for Crimson Tide football news, notes, information. In my own words, with yours truly, Stephen Smith of Touchdown Alabama Magazine. Happy to have everybody tuning into the show, tuning into the channel on today as we're breaking down Crimson Tide football. And we get into now, which game on this schedule to U.S. fans are you looking at as this is the game of the year? And I understand we are in a day and age where we don't like to use the absolute terms, the terms like must have and gotta have and need to have and must win and, terms like that. But in football, it's a bit different because there are games that you actually do need to have. I mean, for example, you have to beat Auburn. You have to beat Auburn if you're Alabama. It's in the fine print beneath the fine print. I mean, one of the things that, Paul Bear Bryant did that he enjoyed just as much as winning national championships and conference titles is being state champion. Beating Auburn in 19 of 25 Iron Bowls. You got to beat Auburn. So in this sense, there are games on the schedule. Every game is important. Every game is needed. But there's always that one game on the schedule where you as a fan, you go, we got to have that game. We must have that game. Bama's got to win this game. This is, the game of the year. And with we've been able to have a football season this year, the SEC going to a 10-game conference-only schedule, I put up two polls over the weekend, two polls. One was on the TDA YouTube side. The other one was on the, in my own words, TDA, the Twitter site. And the poll question was, for you as an Alabama fan, which game will be the game of the year to you? And the four answer choices that were provided, you had Georgia, LSU, Auburn, and Florida. And with 45.4% of the vote on Twitter, Georgia was the team of the year, was Georgia represents the game of the year, according to you out there, Tide Nation. And with 53% of the vote on YouTube, Georgia took it again. So for the fans out there, Georgia's the game of the year. Georgia's the game that Alabama must have. It's got to win. It's got to dominate the Bulldogs. And I agree with that statement. I agree with that statement to a certain extent, just because of the fact that if Georgia is the first game of the season off the bat, we don't know as of right now because the Crimson Tide has not released its full schedule as of yet. But if Georgia happens to be the first game of the season for Alabama, you're looking at taking on Kirby Smart, taking on Scott Cochran. And if you look at this on paper, for a lot of people in national media, Georgia's the team to beat. Georgia's got the 5 stars. Georgia's got the defensive talent. This could possibly be the best defensive team that Kirby Smart is fielding for the upcoming season. And after what happened last year with the College Football Playoff Committee, and we all know what happened last year, Alabama had a full schedule. It had some tough games, but it also had some easy, cupcake matchups. And we don't like to look at the referees as having a major impact on the game. We like to see the officials as, they make calls, but we want football to be recognized for the big plays made by the student athletes and also the great calls made by the various coaching staffs. But going back to the LSU game last year and the Auburn game last year, there were a couple of questionable calls by the officiating crews that led to the outcome, of both of those football games. And, Alabama lost those games by a combined 8 points. And while for some people out there in the media eye, Alabama, even with 2 losses, was still looked at as one of the top 4 teams, one of the best 4 teams, in the country. College Football Playoff Committee said, we're just going to put Bama at 12 or 13 in the rankings. And if they did that, with Alabama having a full schedule with easy games included, imagine what would happen or how the playoff committee could take it with this schedule right here. And Alabama was to open the year with a loss to Georgia. The Tide would have to just abuse the other 9 teams on the schedule by 14 or more points to have that opportunity. So I understand why most of you as the fans will look at Georgia, But you got some fans going, nah, Steven, nah, Pimp Juice, nah, homie. It ain't Georgia's LSU. LSU, bruh, is the game of the year. We lost to LSU. Bama lost to LSU at home at Bryant-Denny. We don't lose nobody, no Bryant-Denny, Steven. Like, this the game of the year. All that trash that Edo was talking about, they won. They got too cocky, man. They got too confident, man. Sitting there saying they was going to beat Alabama in everything, in recruiting, on the field, for championship, Steven. This is a revenge game, bruh. We got to get LSU. Alabama's got to get LSU. Because if Bama don't get LSU, we could lose the state of Louisiana in terms of recruiting. This is a revenge game. And once again, I would agree with those who say LSU is the game of the year. And the reason why, with Georgia being in the SEC East, if you were to lose to Georgia but still beat everybody else, you still have the opportunity to, win the SEC West, face Georgia again in the SEC title game, win that game, that being the game that matters, and still find your way into the college football playoff. It kind of goes back to the 2011 season where Alabama lost to LSU in the regular season, but faced it again in the 2012 BCS title game and got the 21-0 victory to win, the national championship. So I can see why people are looking at LSU, but also Auburn. Auburn actually had 19.5% of the vote on Twitter. It had 9% of the vote on YouTube. And going back to a statement that Noah Igbenogany, former Auburn corner now in the NFL, made, he said, Auburn's the best team in the state now. Auburn's won two of the last 3 Iron Bowls. Tigers are the best team in the state. Tigers of Auburn, best team in the state of Alabama. And once again, you look at that, there's a reason why Bill Curry, Ray Perkins, and Mike Shula did not last long at Alabama. The reason why they didn't last long, could not consistently beat Auburn. And remember what Gene Stallings once said. Coach Stallings mentioned you got to beat Auburn. You may not beat them every season, but you have to beat them more times than what they beat you. Auburn, that matchup will be played in Bryant-Denny and Tuscaloosa this season, but you've got, Gus Malzahn, Bo Nix at quarterback, who's expected to take, a jump, from freshman to a sophomore year. Chad Morris as the offensive coordinator, and then, defensive coordinator Kevin Steele continues to be, masterful running that side of the football for the Tigers. So you always have to keep your eye on Auburn. And then Florida had 2.8% of the vote on Twitter and 6% of the vote on YouTube. Florida will be interesting. Now, it will come down to, does Alabama play Florida at Gainesville, Ben Hill, Griffin Stadium, the Swamp, or does Florida travel to Tuscaloosa to play the Tide? But Florida, strong roster. Dan Mullen, good head coach. Kyle Trask, good quarterback. Emory Jones, strong backup there. They've got pieces on both sides of the football, so it'll be interesting to see what Florida does. But the question is, for you as a fan, when you look at the season, which game is the game of the year to you? Which game, when you look at it, you go, Alabama has to win. Alabama must win. If Alabama loses this game, I'm not watching the rest of the season. If Alabama loses this game, it's a done deal. Put a fork in it. I don't know if we're going to make the championship. I'm not sure if we're going to make the college football playoff. Which game to you as a fan is the game of the year? So definitely want to get your thoughts on that when we come back from the other side of the break. I want to hear your viewpoint. So as a fan, which game to you is the game of the year? And then on top of that, the second part of this question is, how will you go about watching the first game of the season? Which game is the game of the year? And how will you go about watching the first game of the season? Both of those two questions I pose to you, the fans, to give your thoughts, give your take, call in, and let's have a dialogue about that. But I also want to shout out Kellen Parker. Kellen Parker donated $9.99 in the super chat. Appreciate that coming from Kellen Parker. But we go to a break right now. Upon our return, we get into your phone calls, thoughts, tweets, concerns. Let's get this conversation popping after this.
T-Town Menswear in the University Mall in Tuscaloosa. Touchdown Alabama Magazine is Alabama football's premier publication. A subscription to Touchdown Alabama Magazine is the perfect gift for any Alabama fan. For exclusive news and information, recruiting updates, a free annual print magazine, and more, go to touchdownalabama.com and click join. Only $5.95 per month or pay $49.95 for a full year subscription. That's a saving of almost $22. Go to touchdownalabama.com today and roll Tide.
Thank you for watching Touchdown Alabama Magazine's YouTube channel. To continue to get the best in Alabama football content, subscribe here and turn on your notifications to stay connected with the hottest shows covering your Crimson Tide.